Well, good evening and welcome to Yada Yahowah Radio. We have a different twist on a show here for you this evening. We're going to cover a few items in the news, which is fairly normal. And then I'm going to present the first ever Surrotten, which hopefully you'll find entertaining to finally answer the Quran's most repetitive taunt. And then we're going to conclude the show by retreating to a place we were at least 2 years ago as we were trying to ascertain who really is Gabry'el, and who is Myka'el in the book of Daniel. And because the Quran claims that Gabry'el and Myka'el are both angels, and that they're both Muslims, and that they both hate Jews, and that they both work for Allah, who has no partners, so I don't know how he has these as partners. But nonetheless, we digress.
Details.
Yeah, just details. I should have put that in the Surrotten. Nonetheless, we digress. But we're gonna actually explore what is said about Myka'el, because it's riveting in the aftermath of October 7th. And I was unaware as to how focused it was on what happened on that day and what our mission is going forward. The first item in the news is that I recall saying this several times, and it's still written in At War with Religion, which is, I think, the second or third chapter of Goddamn Religion, Volume 1. And it was part of 2 radio programs where I said, Joe Biden's initial rhetoric, some speech writer, I'm sure, scribed it for him, but in support of Israel was better than Netanyahu's, because initially Netanyahu was like he was shell-shocked. And he should have been, because he made it possible for October 7th to happen. That means he's not to blame for October 7th, but he made so many blunders that it became possible for Hamas to perpetrate the worst terrorist act in years, maybe in the history of Israel, of God's people. And at the time where I said, you've got to give him credit, his rhetoric for Israel is positive, but I know the history of this man. I know the nature of the progressive administration that he has rallied around him. And I'm here to tell you for certain, don't get comfortable with this, Israel. This is a Trojan horse. And he will destroy you from within.
Right.
2 programs ago, I shared that the Biden administration has announced to the media that their intent is to impose a fake Palestinian state, and to do so without Israel's support, to do so without any negotiation, to do so without any concession, just to do so. And that they will do it one of 2 ways. They'll either propose it and acknowledge that the existence of a fake Palestinian state, or they will not exercise their veto at the United Nations, where the world is about 95% anti-Israel. So this past week, Netanyahu said, listen, I have an assurance from Biden that he's not going to impose the fake Palestinian state, the 2-state solution, which is nothing but the Neville Chamberlain's guarantee of the next world war. And, be careful on this. If I don't think anybody listening to this program would be anti-Semitic, but should you not care that much about Israel, then you need to know that awarding Muslims who have terrorized Israel on a routine basis a state where they can have as many weapons as they wish to amass against Israel is going to bring World War III. So it's not just Israel that will suffer. So after that, then now the Biden administration has come out and saying, listen, I've told Netanyahu that there'll be no Rafta operation. Well, if there's no Rafta operation, then Hamas wins. Hamas leadership went to the Rafah area. They're hiding in tunnels there. If Israel doesn't go there, Hamas not only executed the most gruesome terrorist massacre in the history of Israel and maybe in the history of the world, but they survived it, and they will continue to rule Gaza and very soon also the areas under the PLO's control, called now Fatah, in the what's called the West Bank. And that's what Biden now is pushing for. And we have to be careful when we say Biden, because I don't think Biden has three neurons that are firing. So it's those around him who hope to hell he's never asked a question and can stay on script. But it is very frightening at this point. Mm-hmm. The next point is that the man who will run against him may be bankrupt by the time he gets there. After losing two, $50 to $80 million cases against the woman that never filed a police report, but 20 years later says that Trump did a naughty to her in an elevator in a department store without any corroboration. I mean, no one to be able to corroborate the story. Just a 20-year-old claim by one person against another, which is one of the things that I have so much trouble with, because you cannot be a fair and impartial jury and claim that one person harmed another when there are no witnesses other than those two people. It's just flat out impossible. So I am. It was devastating to have a New York, but it's exceedingly progressive, so they hate Trump. And two juries in a row that awarded that. But now a judge has ordered Trump to pay $355 million, and he's banned from running any company in the state of New York for 3 years for his loan applications, where the view was that he exaggerated the value of a property. Now, I'm here to tell you that there's probably 90% of loan applications, the applicant takes the most favorable view that is possible of that property. And it is the applicant's responsibility to present the property in its best possible light, and it's the lender's responsibility to discount that so that they have reasonable collateral. That's just the way that it works. And for a judge not to know that, but judges, are business people, and this person, I'm sure, is a progressive liberal judge and imposed his politics. But that means that between legal fees and the two cases and this one, Trump is out more than a $500 million. And you just can't hit someone with $500 million and say you can't do business in the state of New York for 3 years and to survive that financially without going bankrupt. Very dangerous stuff that the United States is doing with its legal system to try to sequester anyone who isn't a progressive, and I find it disgusting. Speaking of disgusting, there was a teenage boy in Gaza who was trying to pick up a humanitarian delivery of food. And Hamas doesn't want the people to have it. They want them to starve. The higher the death toll, the better. And so a Hamas gunman shot and killed him. And, of course, there's no news media in Europe that's going to pick this up because, of course, it doesn't fit their narrative. But there have been riots since that time in Gaza where it's finally reached the point where Gazians are disgusted by Hamas. Not that it will do them any good. Also, Egypt has been caught building an enormous wall next to Gaza, and you say, why? Now, if they love Muslims and they are so concerned about the Fakistinians, then why wouldn't you want them to come into Sinai where you have a ton of empty land? And no, they're building this wall so that if there's any that escape into the Sinai, they can put them behind this wall in the middle of the desert that can hold like 30, 40, 50,000 of them. But there's no Muslim country that wants them. They are simply there to garner worldwide hate against Israel. So a very precarious situation that the world finds itself in. One last item in the, well, I guess two items in the news here. Hamas spokesman, you're dealing with an upright person when they're completely masked and all you can see is the eyes. So this is a man looking like a woman in Islam, is pointing his finger and waggling it and says, it's the responsibility of the Jews that there's been heavy losses among the Israeli hostages and that the remaining hostages are living in extremely difficult conditions, which is to say, of the 100 or so hostages that are left, probably in the range of 35 of them are still alive, and those have been tortured to the point where their lives are not recoverable. And nonetheless, the President of the United States is saying there has to be a pause, and there has to be a hostage deal, and you can't go into the Rafah area. But the hostage deal that Israel offered, is just insane for Israel. I'm so embarrassed for Israel. They were going to let out 1,500 Palestinian terrorists, men with blood on their hands, for whatever it will be, 35 or so remaining abused hostages. What a travesty!
Yeah.
I mean, you can't honorably release one convicted terrorist for a kidnapped individual. If you do that, you have no future. You are certain to be tormented forever. I know that sounds terrible for the people that are hostages, and I know Israel has culpability because it did nothing to thwart this attack for hours and hours and hours. But nonetheless, you can't reward terrorism that way, or you will unfortunately have to endure it forever. There was a sad announcement today. A man who my wife knows very well. She spent every weekend with him for many, many years. Alexie Navalny. He was the political rival to Putin. Has died. Now, to say he died where he was put, and above the Arctic Circle, where they routinely torture inmates, is to say that the Russians killed him. And this is a man that had a sense of humor, keen wit right to the end, and Leigh and I are at odds on this because I said that he did something that was exceedingly foolish, and to do it for politics is, as a patriot, is just wrong. But after he had recovered from being poisoned, and with the Russian court saying that you're in violation of your parole, if you come back to Russia, you'll be arrested and put in prison. Nonetheless, he got on a plane and flew to Russia as if he thought that this somehow a miraculous uprising from the Russian people was going to save him. If he had a Messiah complex, I don't know, but he did. He was thrown in prison and would never ever get out. And subsequently, he has been killed. It's a sad situation really for so many people around the world. But nonetheless, we don't pursue politics. We don't acclaim patriots. And if you lay down your life for a cause that does not have value, and you do it foolishly, that is not heroism in my book. But I do want to acknowledge the fact that it is grievous what was done to him, and Putin's soul is deeply stained by this event. I'm going to begin here in Quran. Second surah. Second surah is the first one after the migration of shame, to kind of put things in perspective. There were 90 surahs revealed in what was Petra. Mecca didn't even exist at the time. And of those, there isn't any insight worth sharing. They're full of lies. It's terribly plagiarized and grossly immoral, tremendously sadistic and demonic, right from the opening surah to the last one in Petra. We finally get to Yathrib, which is a Jewish community. Muhammad and his gang of misfits are broke. They won't work. They're living off loans provided to them by Jews. They're living in Jewish homes. And Muhammad wants to be a big shot and a warlord, a godfather, if you will. And he has sent out, first thing he did is send out 12 different terrorist raids to rob caravans, civilian enterprises, of his former neighbors and extended family members, the Quraysh. So we are now in Yathrib, and the second surah is revealed, and the first 100 verses or so of the second surah are purely anti-Semitic. This is Yahweh, or excuse me, this is Allah, Allahu is, or Allahi, or Allaha, depending on where you read it, wants to claim Jews as his own, and yet wants to kill them all the same. He has to claim them as his own to be able to claim the Torah as his, which he claims that he revealed and confirmed by his Quran. And then he wants to wipe Jews out to the last and justify killing them. So he then demeans them in the next breath. So it's kind of a whiplash experience to read the second surah. You don't know which side of Allahi, Allahu you're going to hear next. But we're going to start here with Quran 2:16. It reads, "Those, the ones who bought, as in purchasing, strain for the guidance, so not profited their commerce, and they were not guided." Now, if you're a normal, sane person and somebody were to read that to you, would say what? But, understand now, I have translated 74 surahs from beginning to end. Now I have the advantage of using interlinears to be very exacting on them. And there's about 100 of the 114 that I have dealt with it to a significant extent. And so I speak Allahu. So I actually know what he's saying here, because he repeats himself so often. So you actually, after a while, you learn to speak Allahu. This is Allahu's first attempt, and the reason I say Allahu, Allah is never written anywhere in the Quran. That's a surprise, I'm sure, to most people. But we have Allahi, Allahu, Allaha, and Ilahi, as well as Rabbi in the various forms, Rabbi and Rabbukum, and then we have Rahman. Rahman was the god of the Arabs who converted to Judaism, of the Sabaeans, whose poetry was plagiarized to become the opening surahs of the Quran, and the rabbis sold Muhammad a bill of goods when they said that rabbi was the proper word for Lord, and so that's the word for Lord throughout the Quran is rabbi. But Allahi, Allahu, Allaha means the al is the for him or to her. There's no reference to Ilah, the Hebrew, the Arabic word for God. No reference to it in it. So this lie that it means the God. No, that's not what it says. It is the as in a title, to him, for him, or to her. And that's just the reality of it. So sorry, Muslims, but this idea that you have but one God and the God is Allah is inconsistent with the Quran. To make that claim, you have to disavow the Quran. Anyway, this was Allahu's first attempt for condemning Jews for the specific crime of selling, not giving, their oral traditions, either through their Torah or their Talmud, to Muhammad. He is inferring that his bastardized accounts that fill the Quran, he's got all sorts of accounts of Adam and Noah and Moshe. There's hilarious ones of Solomon and the hoopoe bird and talking ants, hoopoe bird is a talking bird, by the way, and bird armies and how they come to terrorize the Queen of Sheba, who finally converts to Islam because she slipped on a glass floor and showed ankle. And you might say, well, that's the most insane thing I've ever heard in my life. It doesn't even come close to the most insane things in the Quran, but that's actually from the Talmud. So the story was pilfered in its entirety from the Talmud, and that's just the nature of the Quran. It has nothing that would cause anybody to think this could possibly be a god, except where it plagiarizes, misappropriates stories from the Torah and the Talmud, and corrupts those names, and then takes those characters out of the places where they were, puts them into Petra, and makes them all junior Mohammeds facing Muhammad's problems, with Allah being the big honker that revealed his scriptures to them. But in fact, they don't even resemble the same thing. You could not have two books more different than the Quran and the Torah. And of course, the Torah is brilliant and filled with prophecy, and its God is Yahowah, and the Quran has a variety of different gods, and it is dimwit. It's the easiest book ever written. So what Allah is claiming here, Allahu, is that the Jews sold their scriptural stories to Muhammad. Now, that's just embarrassing by itself, and there's like 40 of these references between the Quran and the Hadith, blaming the rabbis for doing this. But why would you say that? What it has to say is, my God doesn't know these stories, so I had to buy them.
Well,
so that's what it says. My God doesn't know these stories, so I had to buy them. And now he's all pissed off that the Jews actually want to be paid for them. But he's even more pissed off because, I guess that's probably, he's upset. He's upset. We're going to say worse in a moment. He's miffed because then what he claims is that the Jews changed the Torah, so that the version that is in the Quran is the correct one, the one that the rabbis read, and that the actual Torah once said the exact same thing as the Quran, which is that Allahu was the God, and that Moshe was a nincompoop, and so was Noach, and so was Adam. They were just total dunderheads, and that Dode and Solomon worshipped Allah and had armies of birds. And, Alexander the Great was an astronaut, and so that's what he claims is the Torah actually said. And he says now the Jews in Yathrib somehow found every copy of the Torah in the world, which means also the Septuagint, the Codexes, Vaticanus, and Sinai. They would have had to have found all copies of the Masoretic text. They'd have to find all copies of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then throw them all away because, well, they read just like the Quran, and then rewrite every single word of them, date them back so they look like they came from the right period, and then bury them all. That's what you've got to believe to go with the Allahu story, unless you're just going to play religion and be stupid. So this account is fairly deadly. So Allah here is inferring that his bastardized accounts, the ones he twisted to make his immoral behavior look divine, are true guidance, while the originals are completely erroneous. Now, this is deadly for Judaism and Islam. Judaism, because rabbis sought to profit by selling a psychopath Talmud readings that were later plague all Israel, and it buries Islam because Allah didn't know enough about these stories and evidently is illiterate and had to have rabbis recite them. The Quran 2:17, their example of the one who kindled a fire, and then when it illuminated what around him, Allahu took away their light and left them in darkness, not they see. Deaf, dumb, blind, so they will not return. Or like a rainstorm from the sky, in it darkness and thunder and lightning. They put their fingers in their ears from thunderclaps, fear, death. And Allahu, the one who encompasses the disbelievers. The lightning almost snatches away their sight. Whenever it flashes for them, they walk in it. And when it darkens on them, they stand. And if Allahu had willed, he would certainly have taken away their hearing and their sight. Lo, verily, Allah on everything, all-powerful. Oh, I hear you smirking back there. You said it can't be that stupid. It is. If Jews are to be credited, now this is my commentary, with producing their own enlightenment, then Allah cannot claim to have inspired the Torah. And if Allah took away the light Jews had kindled, Allah cannot claim to be the inspiration behind the prophets and Psalms, which the Jews wrote. If Allah wants Muslims to believe that he blinded Jews, then he cannot claim that they read about Muhammad in their Torah, which he does incessantly. And if he made them dumb, they would not have been able to recite the Talmud stories that he just criticized them for selling. Moreover, Jews cannot return to where they have never been. So, going beyond that, this snake is really inept at metaphors. Jews cannot have been made deaf or blind if they can see the lightning and hear the thunder. And if the serpent rendered them unhearing, there'd be no reason for them to place their fingers in their ears. Moreover, even puppy dogs and autistic children are not scared to death by a clap of thunder. Dumber still, by speaking of himself in third person, encompassing these enterprising Jews, following the terrorizing thunder, Allah became a run-of-the-mill storm god. And as if not even listening to his own diatribe, after saying that he made the Jews deaf and blind, he claims that he could certainly have taken away their hearing and sight, because he is all-powerful on all things. Now, the reason, and I'm going to get through this, we're going to go to the Surrotten. The reason we're returning to this is that our mission is to save Yisrael. That is our mission. The day of reconciliation is fast approaching. It's less than 10 years away. And Yahweh and Dod are coming back for Yehudim and Israelites. And Muslims want to annihilate them from the river to the sea. They have wanted to annihilate them since Muhammad created this stupid religion. And so it is imperative that we equip Israelites with the truth about Islam so they know who attacked them, who mutilated them, who raped them, who murdered them. It's essential that they know this. This is an integral part of our mission. And at the same time, to share the truth from Yahweh as he revealed it through his prophets, and particularly through his son, Dod, and what he is offering them. So this is just essential to our mission. It is the reason that I was called to do this. It was the reason that 22 years ago, the first thing Yahweh asked is, I want you to expose and condemn Islam. So we were in a position and prepared to do this for Israel and Jews at this time. The fact that we have been immersed in the moronic, well, not everyone who is listening, but I certainly have now 1,900 pages into this rewrite, into the moronic dribble of the Quran so long, we have endured so many dehumanizing, dim-witted, and demonic diatribes that we're all at risk for becoming desensitized to this grossly inappropriate and inane recital. What we are reading is so pathetic, so far beneath the dignity and aptitude of God, so inept, we must occasionally step back and contemplate what is actually occurring and why. 6 millennia ago, a very clever cherub, a karub, to use the Hebrew, who was degraded to a reptilian serpent, appeared adroit in the way that he beguiled Chawah. He was so adept in misrepresenting God, Yahweh acknowledged him as being particularly conniving. But that is clearly no longer the case. There is nothing clever about the Quran. My initial assessment was that Satan was simply playing to his audience, since the Arabs who were attracted to Muhammad were particularly ignorant, irrational, illiterate, and immoral. For these malcontents, and at this moment of time, it was enough to entice and control a sufficient number of terrorists to force others into submission. But why did the spell that was cast endure and spill out of Arabia? When it's scrutinized, the Quran is so obviously deficient and it's so demeaning, it should not have survived to torment anyone today. In trying to ascertain how we came to this deplorable place, we have to set aside the cherub's encounter with Chawah, because long ago he cleverly played to her passions and expertly misappropriated and misrepresented Yahweh's instructions. But then he was working alone and not through a Rasuli or messenger or apostle, and he had not yet been denigrated and degraded by Yahweh. Yahweh was the one who says, okay, you were this, this Garub, this beautiful being of light, and now you're a snake. So we hear nothing of Satan for a millennia, even though his presence is felt among the Nephilim. His presence is felt in Babel and also seen in Sodom. But he does not become a player again until King Shau'wl is demon-possessed. As a result, the people's choice of leaders not only reinterprets the Torah to his situation, he turns on Dod, who is the hero of God's story. Our next acknowledgement of Satan's existence is in Yasha'yah 14, where we are told that the Lord's ambition is to be worshipped as if he were the Most High. He does not want to be known as the adversary. He wants to be known as the one and only God. This essay on the devil speaks of his Babylonian origins, his arrogance, and his duplicity. He is cited in the chapter speaking, while his claims are exceedingly narcissistic and self-indulgent, striking similar notes to what one reads in the Quran. But at this time, his rhetoric was still considerably more lucid. A few hundred years thereafter, Satan makes a reappearance as the god of the book of Ezekiel. He suddenly becomes far more dramatic, not only in his own over-the-top depictions of himself, but also of his monstrous edifices and his glorified plans. He is particularly demeaning and demonic, derogatory and deadly, even anti-Semitic. Communicating through his enslaved, which is the theme that Allah plays off of, non-prophet Ezekiel. The writing quality, while deplorable, isn't as deficient as the Quran. And since Ezekiel was nothing more than Satan's stooge, the inference is that we are listening directly to the devil speak of annihilating his resurrection day. The ghoulish event, which blood is consumed along with the bodies of men, 3 in particular, I get to be one of them, I have dubbed the Feast of the Beast. Much better written, the parallels between Ezekiel and the Quran are considerable. Now, since religious Jews adore Ezekiel, it appears that Satan was appealing to their shared desires to lord over Yahweh and to write their own script. Affirming this, not only are we introduced to the Zohar, which is central to Judaism, in Ezekiel, Kabbalah draws its inspiration from Satan's first attempt at playing God. So through Ezekiel, the Lord of Babel's appeal is to Jews who think they are superior to everyone and in everything, including Yahweh and his Torah. Hylel bin Shakar's approach changes appreciably as he possesses Shau'wl, the self-appointed murderous religious zealot on the road to Damascus, as the first man on record to call himself a rabbi. I don't know if people know that. The first acknowledgement of a person in writing calling himself a rabbi is Shau'wl Paul. The term was not used by other Jews until the early 2nd century. Shau'wl, who became Paul, changed his name, as was the case with Abu al-Qasim becoming Muhammad. Abu al-Qasim means that he likes to play with satanic and divination and other kinds of occult pastimes. Well, they were both non-prophets serving Satan as Satan's apostles. Paul was a student of the Torah. He knew the prophets, while Muhammad was illiterate and ignorant. Therefore, Paul's 14 epistles, while poorly written and filled with all manner of contradictions and logical fallacies, they are still infinitely superior to the text of the Quran. Now, I've used to mock Paul's writing style. His writing is horrific, but it's brilliant, and his misappropriations of the Torah and prophets to support his view, while they're all filled with contradictions and misappropriations, nonetheless, they are vastly superior to what we read in the Quran. So, since Abu al-Qasim, the man who is now known as Muhammad, and Shau'wl, the man known as Paul, both admitted to being demon-possessed, while claiming to speak for the God of the Torah, who they were constantly contradicting, we're left to wonder whether the vastly superior rantings in the Christian New Testament were a product of the intellect of the accomplice and that of his intended audience. Said another way, was the degraded serpent playing to arrogant and enlightened Greeks and Romans through Paul, and to the opposite of that through Muhammad? To men so deprived of cognitive function, they were willing to believe these recitals, even to be enslaved by them if it led to booty. Or were the underlying texts of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam written the way they were because Satan was enabled and also constrained by the intellect and literacy of his advocate? Recognizing that no one is capable of credibly playing God. And that's a tough role. If you're a snake, you ought not do it. You just don't have the wherewithal to play God. The transition in rhetoric from the brilliance found in the books attributed to Moshe, to Dowd, to Yashaya, and to the lack of prophecy and competency found in Ezekiel and Enoch, Job and Jonah is palatable. And yet, they are better written than Shau'l's deplorable letters. And Paul is a genius of great literary prowess compared to Muhammad's recital, which is easily the worst book ever written, although it wasn't written within 100 years of his death. So, has Satan degraded over time? Heat stroke in the desert. Like a man with dementia, akin to what we're witnessing with Joe Biden. Surely, human intellect across the board hasn't fallen so appreciably that the Quran was Satan's best effort under the circumstances. This leaves us with an additional consideration. Did Satan play to another audience? We know that he composed Ezekiel for Jews who thought that they were better than their G-D, and who believed that they could write their own Torah, and did. He inspired Paul's epistles for the Romans and Greeks who thought that they were better than Jews. And then he recited the Quran for Arabs who were content to rob, rape, and kill Jews, since they had nothing better to do with their lives. Or, by aiding and abetting all three, was Hylel bin Shakar thumbing his nose at Yahowah, showing the Almighty that he could play all men for fools, from the intellectual to the incapacitated. Our options are to conclude that the Quran was the worst book ever recited because Satan's mental acuity had degraded over time, because Muhammad was an imbecile, because the intended audience was ignorant and illiterate, or because he wanted to embarrass God to such an extent that he would give up on his creation and not return to Yisrael. Pick your poison. Those are your choices.
Yeah.
But let's
all
not
intriguing.
disparage God to the extent that we pretend that he is the voice of the Quran, or that Muhammad was a prophet.
Right. And
for your sake, don't stoop to worship the Lord of delusion as if he were God. Quran 2:21 and 22. O the mankind, worship Rabbukunu, your Lord, the one who created you, and those from before you, so that you may become right. The one who made for you the earth a resting place, and the sky as a roof, and sent down from the sky water, then brought forth therewith of the fruits a provision for you. So do not set up rivals to Ilahi while you know. Now, it's easy to see how humankind was duped into believing that gods wanted to be worshipped. Gods, including Hashem, Jesus, and Allah, were crafted by men who sought the same.
Mm-hmm.
But this cannot be true for the Creator, because a superior being ceases to be credible when worshipped by an inferior being he has created for the purpose. It shows that he is pathetic and that he is inadequate, as deplorable and unlovable as Hitler, Sakal, Satan, Stalin, or Mao.
Yeah.
By demanding worship from men, Allah shows that he is insecure and needy, a narcissist who is inferior to men. By claiming to be the Lord while humiliating man, Allah is demonstrating that he is in fact Hylel bin Shakar.
Mm-hmm.
Since believing is the result of not knowing, it cannot be the means to being right. And it is not right to call the earth a resting place or the sky a roof. To be God, the Spirit cannot be consistently wrong. Rain and fruit are not proofs of divinity, so there is no rational connection between them, and not setting up rivals to Allahi. Although that is an intriguing thought. What would comprise a rival? Another cherub? A bigger and badder snake? Someone who is actually literate? Incredulously, we read 2:23 and 2:24. And if you are in doubt of what we have revealed to our slave, then produce a surrotten, a surah, like it, and call your witnesses from other than Allahi if you're truthful. But if not you do, and never will you do, then fear the fire whose fuel is the men and the stones prepared for the infidel disbelievers, the kafir. That sounds like a challenge to me. What do you think we take it up? Well, at first I would say, well, I'll just dismiss it. Dr. Seuss writes better sonnets than this. They're original, they're instructive, they're nurturing, and even chronological. So I call the Grinch to witness. He's no less real, and he's a lot less disturbed. And conveniently, he's even green. Nonetheless, I am ready to take up the challenge. I have assembled my advisors, me, myself, and I, and we are ready to snark. Now, if you're a reader up to this point, you have read 1,800 pages of goddamn religion. You have read 74 surahs from beginning to end. You have considered 100 of the 114. You know that all the Quran had going for it was rhyme and rhythm and nothing else, because there is nothing said in the Quran. It is stunningly sadistic and stupid. Mm-hmm. So, to match this challenge, it's got to rhyme. It's got to have a little bit of rhythm, but it can't say anything that is intelligent. Okay? So that's the challenge, because the challenge is to create one like it.
That's hard.
It doesn't say to create a book or a chapter that is beautifully written. No, it said one like it. So that's that is what I accepted. This is my Surrotten. It is the Surrotten of Al-Kafir, the Disbeliever. I'm going to share it now. Worship me or we'll torture you, said a whiny Allahu in his crappy Quranu. I paid rabbis to recite their stories and then changed them to make inane allegories. When the Jews mocked us for doing so, I silenced them with a savage blow. We blamed them for what we did, then took a bow in our masjid. Not a god, just a snake. It's all a colossal fake. It's not much of a rant, but it comes with this fun Surrotten you can chant. So do a salat, pay the zakat, kill a kafar. It's all for naught. We know that you can be bought. Just don't get caught. And yet they fought in the great onslaught to win our bonus jackpot. Virgins served up as if they were candy. It was a devilish lie that came in handy. Believing is quite incontrovertible. And as a bonus, I come across morbidly merciful. Besides, we are the greatest. We are the worst God ever. But you believe, and that makes me quite clever. We're the ones worthy of praise. Disbelieve, and we'll burn your ugly ass in our blaze. Okay, I know it's animal cruelty, but it shows that we have mental acuity with a dash of ambiguity. And we remind you of the winged ass, Babylonian and stolen, making me quite crass. But with this inane account, we put our trophy on your temple mount. From the river to the sea, Fakistan will be free. Sure, it's a lie, but nonetheless, you will die. Since we enslave through submission, freedom is our form of sedition. That's quite an admission. Groping in the dark, there has been so much snark. Demonic dreams became never-ending curses, from an idolatrous indulgence to satanic verses. From an astonishing ass to becoming an ass, it was a lot of dribble to amass, but alas, we are low class. Not to be forgotten as verboten, just because it's rotten for the wanton to seek the ill-gotten. With terror as our tactic, our aspirations are galactic, even if the end is anticlimactic, and we are apocalyptic. Our verses may be demeaning, but never forget our swords are gleaming. When all is told, they will fold, heads will roll in a massive death toll. That may sound crude, but I am that rude. Taunting or torturing, it's all the same to me, as are heaven and hell, so we will cop this plea. Yes, it's criminal and delusional, so unforgivable. It's subliminal and inexplicable, especially for the imbecilic. Yes, for us. Yes, as for us, I was schizophrenic. But we're better now. Not really, but let's pretend somehow. I terrorized everyone who disobeyed, I must confess, including mythical people, but we digress. Rocks talk, mountains fly, skies fall. The sun is our obedient slave. So for those who behave, we'll open your grave. We'll play with bones in our enclave, resurrecting bodies. It's all the rave for the slave to behave. It's the day of doom. From the tomb, you presume, we'll exhume to the showroom where carnality will resume. I have like a billion names, so call me whatever. It's all fun and games. I'll reward you all the same for the endeavor, although maybe never. If you forget, I'll remind you until you scream, I created you in a dream. It was from a bunch of revolting stuff, none of which was up to snuff. It was all really yucky, so aren't you so very lucky? Join the faith, O little you without a brain, or we will see that you are among the slain. So let's not feign that it is I who reign, or was that rain? I can't recall, because I'm insane. But what does that say of you, based upon what you claim? Plan your plots, you stinking blood clots. But no, we are the best of schemers, and you are for naught but screaming lemurs, you worthless daydreamers. My pet monkey, Al-Rasuli, he's no prize, but I must advise, he's full of lies with a thin disguise. He's a real pervert, so you'll not be safe unless you convert. He's a rapist and terrorist, a murderer and slaver, but he did me a favor, so I gave him a waiver. Since he's like me, you better like him, or the outcome will be quite grim. Besides, fair warning, he's a sadist, both the latest and the greatest. So am I, and that's no lie. So don't be insulting, or he'll come and start sulking. Should you think to mock, we'll throw our black rock. But not to worry, don't be dreary. There's always an excuse for those who are leery, even if quite eerie, especially for those offering goodly loans in honor of my fractured stones. So here's my warning. I am forming an alarming day of erection, because I can be a real dick. It's all of all my cons. It's my favorite stick. I don't have a clue as to when it will arise, but for my guys, it scrapes the skies. Even as I advise, it's no prize. For those we chastise, especially the wise, it's the worst screwing I could devise. I thank you for listening to us recite, but we predestined it because we must be right. Have I told you I'm the best? Then say, lo verily, don't associate us with the rest. Besides, if you do, I kill you. Don't set up rivals, or there will be reprisals. I was a crook, so there is no book, so don't look, or you'll be forsook. Illiterate and imbecilic, immoral and idiotic, all perfect for the myopic and despotic, fitting because we are psychotic. So bow down, prostrate, and we'll stay out of your apostate. Worship me, and we'll let you live until I change our mind. Well, if reptiles were so inclined. Unless you're a disbelieving doofus, then we'll snuff you out without a fuss. Never mind the pus. There's not much to discuss. We see all, so we know there's clear proof that this is a spoof. That makes Muslims a crappy fraud, but no hard feelings, because I'm a lousy God. So let's do something really bad. Killing Arabs can be the latest fad. Engage in a little jihada. It'll be like reciting the full shahada. We can rape and rob them too. After all, they did it first to you. I'll uphold all the terror, but never was there a point. It'll upend all the terror, but never was a point for the punitive purveyor, just the player of misguided manslayer and soothsayer or naysayer. As your accomplice, I'll bind them with my fetters, and they'll never see you coming with this mind-numbing Surrotten forthcoming. crazy, I know, but I must confess the clencher was a blunder under duress. Tossing some extra virgin on my specialty, I got lost in a word salad of great enormity. Demure virgins became a lure, and now for which there is no cure. Some lightning and thunder, and they'll be left to wonder how this rhyme led to such a crime. Contest won, it's been so much fun, and all with words without a gun. A God not me, so let this be. Ditch your burqas and the Qurans, and I'll stop this babble, so you'll not spawn the next pawn or bomb. Nice chat, but I smell a rat. We'll do it again so that I can win, albeit not with my evil twin to his chagrin. We'd admit that Allah He is Satan, but then I'd be beratin'. Proof is in the mail, I never fail, and that's the end of my snake's tale. Say Allahu Akbar, Allahu is a mouse, a fitting conclusion to this route over the idolatrous rock house.
I think you won.
I give you the Surrotten. My conclusion was the great Surrotten challenge has been accepted and bested by an ugly Surrotten. And so that you know, I would have written a nice poem, but that wouldn't have met the criterion. The dare was to create one the likes of Allahus, and even then, with a full complement of verbs, pronouns, and prepositions, I still colored outside of the lines.
Yeah, it was far more coherent than the competition.
Now, I want to tell you the truth is that somebody that is not familiar with the Quran wouldn't know that everything that I said was an inside stab at the heart of what of Allah's rhetoric. So it is all in mocking him from beginning to end, with his day of resurrection and I burn you and I kill you and my al-Rasuli. The whole thing it plays off of what he says. Let's do a little jihada. It'll be like reciting the full shahada. It's Islam.
Yeah, every line was a stab. Every line.
Every line was a stab that came out of the Quran. Now, we are I pick up this story and I said we're 3/4 of the way through the Quran chronologically, and yet this is the first time that Gabry'el, the messenger, is named. And even then, it's a complete farce. Gabriel spoke to Daniel in the 7th century BCE, not to Muhammad in the 7th century CE. Further, Gabriel is Allah's foremost enemy, and in that regard, he is joined by Myka'el. These men are also outspoken opponents of Muhammad and Islam, making the opposite of what I'm about to share you from Quran 297 and 98 true. Say, whoever is an enemy to Gabriel, and lo, verily, he brought it down on your heart by permission of Allah, confirming what was before it, and a guidance and glad tiding for the believers. Whoever is an enemy of Ilahi and his angels and his messengers and Gabriel, and Myka'el, then lo, verily, Allah, an enemy to the disbelievers. Now you might say, okay, that's just total gibberish. No, it's very, very clear here. Well, Ilahi himself, as Satan, was the demonic spirit who terrorized Muhammad in the first Quran surah 90 surahs ago. The non-prophet wants us to believe that the tormenting invader was Gabriel. Like most everything else, this name was misappropriated from Yahweh's testimony. Allah seems to have a very limited imagination, and his range of emotions is also limited. The moment we're introduced to Allah's pretend cohorts, which is kind of funny because Allah claims he was a loner, don't associate anybody with me, they are off to war, condemning their enemies for rejecting their doctrine of submission. Every word of this reeks of Satan, the real enemy of the Jews. As previously discussed and earlier in Goddamn Religion, both in volumes 1 and volumes 2, we're now in volume 3, pursuant to the In'ain Hadith, attempting to explain the horrid initial recital. Gabry'el is not only a man and identified as such during the meeting with Daniel. The Hebrew basis for that name affirms that he is human. Gabry is from Gabor. That's a particularly strong and resolute human, a capable and confrontational individual. It's one of the Hebrew words for man. It just happens to be a strong man is a Gerber. The same word, vocalized Gabar, speaks of a man who is exceptionally proficient and assured, resolute and influential. These ideas are expanded in Gabor, which is based upon them, and describes the most capable and courageous, competent and heroic leader among men. Therefore, when these concepts are joined together with El, God, and with Ani, which is where the Y comes from in Gabry'el, the result is, I am God's most competent, capable, confrontational, and courageous man. There's only one person who can make that claim, and that is David, the Messiah and King, the Son of God, our Savior. This is what makes the prophecy in Daniel 9 so powerful, is that the Messiah was speaking of what he himself would accomplish. And since no one has ever been more devoted to Israel than Dod, nor more committed to protect and save his people, when pilfering a name for the alleged angel, reciting the Quran to the Rasuli, Allah could not have made a less appropriate choice. But the adversary's reasons are likely twofold. First, since the Christians in Petra were falsely led to believe that Gabry'el heralded the birth of baby God when speaking to the mythical Virgin Mary. So they told Muhammad that he couldn't be as important without a similar pronouncement. So the non-prophet began making up stories of Gabry'el, claiming that he was the source of the Quran. And then he evidently was able to convince his own God to corroborate his lies. The second possibility for what is otherwise an obvious blunder is that Dod, as the returning king and Yisrael's savior, is Satan's nemesis. When he returns, the devil's gig is over, and it's off to Sheol for Allahu. So by claiming Gabry'el for himself, Allah is recasting the future to suit his agenda. Now, as for Myka'el, his actual name is Myka'el. He's also a man, and he is introduced to us through the same series of prophecies where he is a witness serving as a sar. That's a representative of the king, Dod. His name is derived from Mai, which means who, Ka and Ken, associated with and connected to, also write about, El, God. Since what is said about Myka'el and our mission, why I'm condemning Allah, Satan, and Islam's submission on behalf of Israelites and Yehudim, while heralding Dod's return with Yahweh and the reconciliation of the Coven relationship, is so essential to who we are, why we're here, what God is trying to achieve, who the players are, where we stand, and the flow of time. I'm going to share with you this evening is something I wrote now probably better part of 2 years ago in dealing with the first time I read Myka'el's name and read these prophecies. And as I reread them to include them in Goddamn Religion, Volume 3, I was struck with how extraordinary they are, particularly following October 7th. And so at that time, Myka'el one who is truthful and right about God and associated with the Almighty, who is representing the king, will have an important role in nourishing the growth and promoting your family's children, taking a stand, present and accountable. Then there will be a time of trouble, beyond which has never existed from a Gentile nation prior to this time. And during this period, your people will be saved, everyone rescued from harm's way and delivered, whose is found written in the book. Daniel 12:1. Let's think about this for a moment. Okay, here's a person who's given, whether you want to call it a name or a title, and it's a man. He's described as a man who is thoughtful and right about God. There haven't been many of those. I'm not sure there's been a single one over the past 2,000 years.
No.
Truthful and right about God. And who is associated with the Almighty. The principal meaning, just direct, with me, who is, ka, associated, connected to El, God, is that God chose this person and he is standing with him and using him. That's the most direct meaning. Well, that certainly sounds like what we've read through about the Nakri and the Choder.
Yes, indeed.
And the hundreds of prophecies about this particular mission. Who is representing the king? I don't think there's anybody else out there who is devoted to representing Dowd. And we're not just representing Dowd by presenting his Mizmor correctly, which I think we are doing something that hasn't been done in the better part of 3,000 years with the groundbreaking insights, profound insights into Dowd's Mizmor. But we're absolutely the first people ever, history of humanity, 3,000 years, that are correctly stating that Dowd served as the Passover lamb, that Dowd fulfilled Matzah and Bakurim, leading to Shabuah, and that Taruw'ah exists to herald his return to fulfill Kippurim, so that he can be our shepherd during Sukkah. That has never been said before, and it is so profoundly important to God's people to understand that is the nature of this man. But the idea of being his Sar is beyond representing that he is the one returning with Yahweh, that he will be our king and our shepherd, that he has served as our Savior, that he is the most enlightening prophet in all of the 1,000 years that Yahweh spoke through them. Dowd has responsibilities at the end. He's the king. And so if you're a Sar, you're working for him. You are one of the... kings delegate. That's what kings do. Now, God happens to be the ultimate delegator. He doesn't do anything alone. Moshe, we're going to go do this. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. No, Yahweh likes to delegate. It's his prerogative. It's his universe. Good managers work that way. Dowd is going to work that way. Myka'el is one of the king's assistants. His purpose will be to have an important role in nourishing the growth and promoting the family of the covenant of Yisrael, which is what we have written 33 books to do. And he will take a stand, be present and accountable. Then there will be a time of trouble, which means that this person had to do all of this before the time of trouble began.
Mm-hmm.
So that he can share it during the time of trouble to save God's people from it.
Yes.
That's what was so striking to me and many things else. We'll read through this. When I read that, it's so riveting because it eliminated the possibility of anybody else, even though we have 10 years left. And can't imagine somebody amassing 33 books on the shelves and tens of thousands of audio programs that's going to come to introduce Yisrael to Yahweh by name and introduce them to their Messiah by name and their Savior by name and explain the Mikra and the covenant and the terms and the conditions that God laid out, and the benefits that he's offering. That doesn't exist anywhere.
Already been done, too.
And it has to exist before the time of trouble.
Yes.
And this is a place where I think Dee and I share an understanding. The time of trouble is exactly 10 years to the day.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
It runs from October 7th, 2023 to October 7th, 2033. 2033 is year 6,000 Yah. That's when we begin Sukkah, camping out with God. So all of the tough stuff that has to be done between Yahweh's return with Dode on Kippurim, which is the first day of the week, October 2nd, 6:22 p.m. in Jerusalem as the sun sets, that's when God's going to come for his family. We read about that on our last show with the 149th Mizmor. We read all about how that's going to occur last week. There is gap of time between that time and we start camping out together in the earth reformed as Eden, when there's a lot of work to do. And so the time of trouble ends exactly 10 years to the day that it started. So there will be a time of trouble beyond which has ever existed. Now that says a lot. I mean, the Romans were bad, the Greeks were bad, the Assyrians were bad, the Babylonians were bad, the Egyptians were bad.
Hitler. Yeah.
The Roman Catholic Church was bad. Europe was bad. The Nazis were bad.
Mm-hmm.
The Muslims have been bad. Well, they're still being bad.
Yeah.
It can be perpetrated by Gentiles prior to this time. And during this period, your people will be saved. Everyone rescued from harm's way and delivered who is found written in the book. That is Wookiee that is barking in the background. There is a fox on my a screensaver on my television, and Wookiee is trying to tell the fox that he is boss.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is so cute.
Yeah, so anyway, there's 13 references to a Myka'el in the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms, 10 of which address ordinary individuals from long ago. The three depictions which apply to this particular individual, where he is being designated by this title, are found only in Daniel. With the other two, they appear in the 10th chapter. Therefore, what we know of him and his identity and purpose is explained here. The most overriding clue as to the nature of this individual is the recognition that Myka'el, one who is associated with and truthful about God, is descriptive as a title. And I think it serves more as a title than as a name each of the three times that it is presented. And it is a compound of several Hebrew words, beginning with my, which is an interrogatory asking us if we know who is being addressed. This is followed by the contraction ki, ka, or ken. If ki, it means indeed, speaking of someone who is certain, truthful, and who is emphatic and reasonable. With ka, it's an individual who's associated with and connected to God. He has a propensity to make this kind of comparisons and associations needed to understand. And with ken, his claims about God are verifiable and correct, truthful, and certain. So Myka'el concludes with El, which is God's title, meaning Almighty God, and therefore all these things point to God himself.
Mm-hmm.
As we would expect, And that's a nice blend also as a title to pair with Elia, because Elia, just the opposite way, God is Yah, Elia. Yah is God, God is Yah. And so Myka'el would be right about God and associated with God. And he's trying to save Yisrael, which means to endure and engage with God. As we would expect from such an individual, especially as we approach Dod's return to defend and lead his people, Myka'el is a Sar, serving as the representative of the king. He is Sar, working for the anointed leader by focusing on his family, which would be Yisrael, and their relationship with God. As such, Myka'el is Sar, clearly designated, overtly authorized, and resolutely empowered by the Messiah and King of Kings. Now, few things are more important to God's people than for them to recognize that Dod is the Son of God. He is our shepherd. He is the Passover lamb. He is the returning Messiah and King. This realization not only nullifies the aspirations of progressives, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, it presents the ultimate Ya'ud, calling his people home. This is the essential truth designated throughout Yada Yahowah, and particularly coming home. It's why we went back and rewrote every book from beginning to end. And it's echoed here now in Goddamn Religion. We are told that Myka'el will be Hagadol, will play an important role in nourishing the growth of Al-Ben Ata, your family's children. That would be the covenant children, the children of Yisrael. This means that he will Gadol intensely and vociferously distinguish himself through amplification and to empower God's people with an occasional Surrotten, just for humor. Further, not only will Myka'el Ahmad be appointed and supported while taking a stand on behalf of the chosen people, his work will commence prior to the Sarah, the time of troubles. And so there is no mistaking his timing with our own today. We are told that the resulting Sarah confinement and adversity will be as a result of Goyim and their nations being more overtly hostile to Jews and Israel than any other time in history. Worse than Assyria, Babylon, Greece, Imperial Rome, the Roman Catholics, Muslims, or the Nazis. And by the way, Sarah is the basis of the country, Mitzrayim, and Sar actually speaks of confinement, and it is where we learn that Yisrael is going to be constrained at the waist and made vulnerable because of this confining where she can live and making her vulnerable as a result. So it is a word that I don't want to use the word hints because it's stronger than that, but certainly indicates that the two-state solution is going to be imposed on Israel and that it's going to be devastating to God's people in the world. Therefore, Myka'el will be speaking out against Islam and the gruesome and genocidal Muslim attacks on Israel, which actually began in 1929 with the Hebron massacre to murder Jews living in their homeland. 1936 to 1939 was the Arab Revolt to remove Jews from their homes. 1948 to 49 was the War of Independence to prevent Jews from returning to Israel. 1964 was the formation of the PLO to terrorize and delegitimize Israel. 1967 was the Six-Day War to obliterate Israel. 1972 was the Munich Olympics to massacre and terrorize Jews by the PLO. 1973 through 79 was the Yom Kippur War, went all the way to 79, which is when the final accords were signed, and the Sinai was surrendered. What a mistake by the United States. To eliminate, and that war was fought to eliminate the State of Israel. In 1987 through 1993, the PLO confronted Israel with the first Intifada, the uprising to terrorize Jews. In 1982, we have the first Lebanon War with the PLO. In 2000 to 2005, we have the second PLO Intifada. Understand that Fatah and the Palestinian Authority and the PLO are all one entity. There's no distinction between them. And that continued to murder Jewish civilians. In 2006, we have the second Lebanon War, this time against Hezbollah, Allah's party. In 2008 and 2009, we have the first Hamas rocket war, just 3 years after the United States made Israel surrender Gaza to the Muslim terrorists. In 2012, we have the second Hamas rocket war. In 2021, we have the Hamas Al-Aqsa war. And in 2022, we have the Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket war, which led to the formal beginning of the time of trouble with the 2023 Hamas massacre, October 7th. Therefore, much of Myka'el's message to restore Yisrael's relationship with Yahweh would be completed by 2023. And that's the turning point, because at no time prior to that did the world almost in unison turn against Israel. And now the lone Trojan horse that's out there that can preclude the demise of Israel with the imposition of a Fakistinian state, America is calling the leader of Israel an asshole, which is grossly inappropriate, even if it were true, and it isn't. Just disgusting. But that shows you just how far America's leadership has fallen.
No joke.
So that means that the next 10 years, with the material completed, you got 10 years to provide this individual, Myka'el, with the opportunity to share it with God's people. Now, if that were not enough to correctly identify Myka'el, one who is truthful and right about God, and associated with him, and place him, Baha'eth Hahi, in this specific period, his contribution to Yahweh's family will be matzah, to find and then share kathab, what is written in the Baha Shefer, in the book, which such that Yehudim are malat, rescued from harm's way and delivered unto Yahweh. When Myka'el is initially introduced, it is in Daniel 10:3, where he is Ichad Ha-Sar Ha-Rishon. Very common Hebrew words. Ichad means that Myka'el is either a certain one of, the one and only, or that in this particular stated role, that he is the first or the foremost person to do what these things I have been describing. There has been no one preceding him, for example, in sharing the correct pronunciation of Yahweh's name, or that the covenant has 5 conditions and 5 benefits, or that the Moed Mikre deliver those benefits of the covenant, and that the most important of them is matzah, which is a 7-day feast, or that Dod fulfilled them, and Dod is returning to fulfill Kippurim, which means reconciliations, and is not a day of afflictions. Ha-Rishon reveals that he is the primary and foremost, and thus the principal person serving in this capacity. He is likely the first to do so. Rishon reveals that he would have begun conveying this particular message before anyone else. Rishon is the basis of the first word in the entire Torah, in the beginning. Barashit, from Rosh. This is further confirmed in Daniel 10:14, which is in Myka'el's voice and reads, "Now I have come to provide you with an understanding of what will happen to your people in the end of days, because the revelation pertains to that time. Now, this does not make Myka'el a prophet.
Right.
Because Myka'el was there to explain to Daniel, not actually for Daniel, but for us reading Daniel, account of this, what Gabry'el had said. So it's Gabry'el, who is the prophet. It's Dod, the greatest prophet in the history of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, there's only one or two other people that you could put in his league as a prophet. No one you can put in his league in terms of all that he accomplished in life. He is one of one. But as a prophet, he can be compared to both Moshe and Yeshaya. And so he's the one delivering this message, and he's telling it about himself, both the fulfillment of Pesach in 33, year 4,000 Yah, and his return on Yom Kippurim in year 6,000 Yah. So he's talking about himself, and Myka'el is there listening. And he's doing what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Explaining it. That's what it says. An explainer is not a prophet. It's handy to have one, because Dod's prophecy was the most complex probably ever spoken, and so it's really handy to have an explainer there to say, this is what he said.
Sure.
let me dumb this down for all of us here so we can understand it. Okay. So the second of three references to Myka'el, who was responsible for explaining what Dod had revealed, is found in the 21st and concluding chapter of the statement of the 10th chapter. There we learn that his role was Nagad, conspicuously reported to us by Ha-Rushum, having been inscribed Ba-Kathab in writing in the book Emeth, which is trustworthy, enduring, and reliable. So this puts this, because it then says Lo Echad Chaziz, uniquely contentious and very intense, even overpowering individual in pursuit of the restoration of God's people. Now, God said, hey, we don't have a lot of time left. And we started this 22 years ago, and we only have 10 years left. So that's not a lot of time to go from 0 Yehudim, who would have been at Kippurim, to, I think there'll be 70,000 by the time we're done. So there's just not a lot of time. So Yahweh chooses people, and by the way, we're going to stop broadcasting, but we will still be recording, and many of those who are with us this evening are listening on their phones, and they will still hear us, plus the archives will have whatever we say after this point. But Yahweh needed at this time, because he doesn't want to overpower the individual, he wants to communicate to us through people. He needed somebody at this time that had some of these qualities. It's time to be contentious. It's time to be intense. It's time to be overpowering and pursuit of the restoration of God's people. And once again, in this pronouncement, Myka'el is again presented as a sar, a leading representative of the king, and his family. His family are not his sons and daughters and wives. His family, the children of Israel, those who will attend Kippurim. It's mistakenly assumed that Myka'el is the name of an archangel. No wings in this case. But such nonsense comes from the book of Jude in the New Testament, where there's a mythical dispute between Michael and the archangel and the devil over the body of Moses. Durst not bring against him a railing accusation. Okay, but let me assure those who, even those who venerate grave sites, that Moshe's words matter. While his body, first, is gone, but otherwise irrelevant. And the devil be damned, Durst or not. Malach do not sar. They don't represent kings. Moreover, there's no record of anyone named Myka'el writing anything which would be Gadol, which would have promoted the growth of Yahweh's family. In particular, while Malach have speaking roles, they are seldom vociferous. And I have a tendency to be verbose. They do not rely on amplification, which I do, nor is it their role to magnify anyone. And as we have discovered, Gabry'el isn't a Malach either. He is instead the greatest man of God.
Yeah.
Therefore, Myka'el is descriptive of a person who validates and verifies the means to develop a relationship with the Almighty. He is the one who is present and accountable, appointed and supported prior to Israel's descent into the time of trouble, which has already begun. And now, since it has already begun, there is no longer any time for someone to arrive on the scene and use their translations and insights to compose something comparable to the 33 volumes of Yada Yahowah.
They also need to be called Yada. I don't see anyone else going by that.
No, I don't either. Or that bases everything they say on Yahweh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I represent him. I serve him. I love him. He is our friend. He is our father. He is our boss. He is everything for us and for God's people. And Yada Yahowah means to know Yahweh. And therefore, friends, you are listening to the results of Myka'el's service to Yahweh and to Yisrael, doing his best to represent Dod as our returning Savior and King. But more than this, Myka'el's role is to explain Daniel's vision so that Israelites understand it before it's too late. And that's what we're going to read next. Bad as Rome and Roman Catholicism have been, what is about to unfold is going to be far worse. In the annals of human history, considering the blight of nations, even the bitterness of the Goy, nothing has ever existed which can compare to the Esh Sarah, period of anguish, adversity, and adversary. Now, I'm here to tell you, that thought was something we shared based upon what we read in the translation 2 years ago. No one could have imagined the worst terrorist act to be perpetrated on Israel in the history of God's people, which is what took place on October 7th. And it just happens to be exactly 10 days to the day of when we began to celebrate the seventh and final Moed Mikre on October 7th, 2033.
10 years, yeah.
Fortunately, it is during the time of trouble that God's people will be awakened and protected, and those who are rescued will find their names scribed in the book of life. This 10 years, although it will be hellacious for God's people, is the best thing that could possibly happen to them, because until there is no hope but Yahweh, they won't listen.
Right.
What's that?
I'm going to read the rest of this prophecy for you in the time we have remaining. And many important and infamous individuals of those who are asleep in the dust of the earth will be awakened. Some of these to the restoration of everlasting life, and others to eternal scorn and shame, insults and reproach, accusations and censure, for having been abhorrent and appalling. Therefore, the circumspect with insight who are discerning, demonstrating the capacity to understand, will become prominent, obtaining a high status, being respected among heavenly beings, shining brightly while enlightening and admonishing, similar to the light of the expanse of the universe, such that they will be greatly valued for the numerous worthy individuals who will be vindicated for being right, becoming like stars as eternal, restoring witnesses forevermore. That's Daniel 12:2 and 3. So what we have here is that God is saying that people of renown, people who are famous and important, or who are asleep, who have died, their souls are going to be raised, and they will be awakened, and that some of them will enjoy a life of restoration and everlasting life, and others are going to go to eternal scorn and reproach, to censure, for having been abhorrent and appalling. This is important because the role that the Tsar Myka'el plays in this drama, as Dode's one of Dode's assistants, is judgment.
Mm-hmm.
He is imbued with the responsibility. Dode doesn't want to do it. It's not that he doesn't want to do it. It's just that he has many other things to be dealing with. It's a 45-day period of judgment. And making this determination is going to be largely Myka'el's responsibility. I think he will share it with Elia, but I'm not certain. I can be certain that it's Myka'el's responsibility, though. That's why he's presented in this context. Therefore, it's important that people be circumspect. That this is Sakal, everything that we're about. We think our way to God. We know God through His words. We make the proper associations to know who He is, what He's offering, and what He is expecting in return. And those who do this thing with the capacity to understand, God is saying they're going to be prominent. They're going to have a very high status. What could be a higher status than inheriting the universe from its creator because you're one of God's sons or daughters? That's as good as it gets. And He's saying you're going to shine brightly while enlightening and admonishing, similar to the light of the expanse of the universe, beyond a single star. There will be those among us who are part of the enlightenment and the bringing home of God's people, the restoration of God's people. He's saying we're going beyond the light of a single star. That's how much energy that you're going to possess. And then he says that such they will be greatly valued for the numerous and worthy individuals who will be vindicated for being right. That is the purpose of this mission. We want, when Yahweh returns on Yom Kippurim in 6,000 Yah in 2033, less than 10 years from now, we want God to be pleased with the attendance at that event. And the attendance isn't based strictly on size, although this says numerous. 149th Psalm spoke of a large crowd. So I think that we'll be, in the range of 70,000 people there. But it's the quality of the people. God would have done all of this for one, if we're just Dode alone. So one was enough. Adam was enough. Abraham was enough.
This reminds me of Abraham and becoming like stars to comprehend if you can. I mean, this is that's.
Are you saying that God's
tied
consistent?
Straight in?
Are you calling God
I
consistent?
am. I happen to be.
Well, you just say, I think that's probably true. And so it does say that we're going to be eternal and restoring witnesses forevermore. La olam alad.
Wow.
That's powerful. That takes us to the point of saying, not only is this the mission, but this is the consequence of this mission. This is the result of this mission. And now, in the light of what happened on October 7th, and the fact that Myka'el is positioned before it to take advantage during it, so we can celebrate like this after it. What a powerful message. Now, as for you, Daniel. Now, Daniel was a scallywag. Daniel, not the brightest boy in the world. He's not a prophet, but he did get to write this down because Dode showed up and said, this is what's going to happen. And there were two others there. I think the two others, very logically, are Myka'el, who's named here, and Elia, who is named elsewhere. So as for you, Daniel, seal up this testimony, making this message secure while precluding access to the meaning that is hidden within the words. and place a stamp and signature on the book until before the time of the restoring witness runs out. That would be until now.
As of last year. Yeah.
Yeah. Many, and notably rabbis and others who are infamous and exalted, will wander about aimlessly rowing up a waterfall, even with access to information which leads to understanding becoming more prevalent. Lots of information out there, all they do is get ever more confused.
It had to be fun translating Shuth, rowing up
yes.
a waterfall.
Yeah, roaming around randomly, accomplishing nothing while rowing against the current. One of my favorite lines is rowing up a waterfall, and that's what the word means. So I got to actually weave in one of my favorite themes into the translation, because it's a correct translation of it. Then it says, "Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, the two others in the end." We know that Eliah is one of them. Now, Myka'el is the other. So both of them are named. Those are the two witnesses in the end. Behold, the two witnesses in the end. They were present, they were appointed, they were accounted for, they were supported while taking a stand. One individual was now present here as the means to channel speech and conveying the message. So you got the two witnesses, they're there, present and accounted for, and now you have a grizzly bear in the picture with the salmon swimming all around, and I don't know if Wookie likes the salmon or the grizzly bear. Oh no! But my wife is going to remove him so that he doesn't eat the turtle, who is the next one on the screen. Okay, so they got the two witnesses, and now you have another individual. One individual who is distinct from these two was now present here as the means to channel speech and convey the message. And the other person was simultaneously present close by as a conduit for words with verbally expressive lips flowing with language. This is our brilliant orator and lyricist, Dode. And he said to the individual of linen garments, because he's coming back to fulfill Kippurim, which means he has to go and anoint the Kipporeth, the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, which means he needs to be in priestly garments to do that, who, for the benefit of the relationship, was from the dimension above and beyond. Okay, with God, we don't talk about status very often, but there is somebody that has status with God. That's Dode. Right. None of us are in Dode's league. We get to live in his home, but Dode's the guy, and he earned it, folks. He fulfilled Pesach and Matzah. Mm-hmm. So Dode's the guy. He is coming from the dimension above. He is coming down as brilliant as the sun. Dode is our king. He's the returning Savior and Messiah. So he is from the dimension above and beyond, the source of the waters of the stream. Remember the stream that is in Zechariah? It's talking about the two witnesses?
Yes.
So he's the source of that stream. So we all are speaking on behalf of God's Son. Why are we speaking on behalf of God's Son? Not just on God, because that's the way God wants it. God's Son did these things. He fulfilled Pesach and Matzah and Bikurim, leading to Shavuot and Taruw'ah, and will fulfill Kippurim and Sukkah. And so God wants him to be recognized for these things. This is what fathers want. God knows who he is. He doesn't need us to praise him. He's very comfortable with who he is. He's proud of his Son. And so our attention is drawn to him. It's just like when Yahweh says in Zechariah that, I'm returning, and I'm returning with the one that you pierced, and you will weep for him as one would weep for a firstborn. God's not saying, you're going to weep for me. He's not saying, you're going to worship me. He's not saying, aren't I great? He said, no, this is my Son. Isn't he great? That's the attitude of God. He is a marvelous Father. It's why we can work for God and kid with him and laugh with him and joke with him and have the best time together. This is how he relates to those like his son Dod. So, the source of the waters of the stream. How long will this restoring witness be until the end of these distinguishing and intensely wonderful explanations and astounding communication of things that would otherwise be difficult to understand? So, this is all being now presented in a way that even the most complicated ideas that God has shaped in future prophecies are now able for thoughtful people to understand. Then I listened to the individual clothed in linen, that's Dod, coming to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant to fulfill the Torah's requirement for the reconciliation of God's people, who, for the benefit of the relationship, was from the dimension above and beyond the source of the waters of the stream, living waters, purifying waters. He raised his right hand and then his left toward the heavens. And then he made a solemn promise in conjunction with the one who lives forever, that there will be to draw near, Moed Moedim, 3 years of restoring witnesses to the appointments. That means those 2 witnesses are going to be in place. It's got to be on Moriah, because that's where this stuff takes place, for 3 years. 2030 to 2033. It'll be Pesach in 2030 that they return, and they'll be here to the end. And in the midst of another, then accordingly the separation of the hand and outreach of the set-apart people will be over. All of these things will come to fruition. Got 3 years at the end. I think that, we begin 6 months after the fulfillment of Taruw'ah, which I'm hoping there'll be 7,000 Yehudim and Goyim that are harvested during the Taruw'ah Harvest. Indications are there will be 7,000. And then, you're there with the most clever, sarcastic orator of all time, in Elia, and I'm honing my my oratory at this point, because I get to stand next to him. That's Myka'el, and we have 3 years. Now, it's not the kind of thing that you would sign up for and say, I want this duty. No, we are going to be slammed and attacked and ridiculed by virtually everybody in the world. It's going to be, ultimately, by the very end, it'll be 70,000, I think, will be the number, against however many have survived the 8 billion that are on the earth. So it's tough duty is the answer to that question. So is anybody saying, well, you're really bragging? No, I'm not. This is what it says. You don't, if God says this is what I'm going to do, that's what he's going to do. Don't run from, it's a really dumb thing to run away from what God wants accomplished. Not only is it counterproductive, and in this case, God has so much writing on this. This is the end of everything, and for the last 3,000 years, there have been very few Yehudim who have listened to him, and that's got to change radically over these next 10 years. And so God's got a lot writing on this. And for any of us to say, well, maybe he's talking about somebody else, let somebody else have this responsibility, that would not go over well. And think of, God just said, this is what's going to happen. How appreciative God is that we're all doing this for he and his people and for his son.
Yeah.
What an honor.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I'm not sure I don't look at it as an honor. I look at it as this is what God wants done. And he is the most fun person ever.
Yeah.
And what a great job. 32 years of my life and our time now together versus benefit of Yahweh being delighted with what transpired and having thousands of family members to celebrate eternity with, all of whom will know, we played some role in this.
Yeah.
be a very gratifying situation. That's why I encourage people. Last week when you said there were some that don't want to read goddamn religion, they just want to do the Torah part, and I said, no, this is essential. This is what is saving Israel. This is what earns us the right to speak to them, for them to listen to us, because we understand their enemy. It's really important. And I know everybody has families and jobs and everything else, and I know I sit here. My wife even brings all 3 meals right to my desk so I don't get up. It's a little different situation, but everything you do is appreciated by Yahowah. So,
you know how you were talking to us about people who can't accept that the status quo is going to change, and they just think that the next day is going to be the same as the next. It's like, we are in this, people. If you can't comprehend that Yahweh has sent, you're not the first person that Yahweh has sent to warn. This has happened in the past, and people didn't listen. So, if you're reading it, you're seeing it. So what if it's Craig? So what if, it doesn't matter who it is so much as that you are here. That's the important part, that it's a fulfillment of Yahweh's words, not about us being glorifying ourselves in some way.
No,
it's just the
goodness,
perspective.
God, no.
Right,
but Yahweh, nonetheless, Yahweh is proud of what we're doing for His people.
Yeah,
He's pleased with what we're doing for His people. Okay. He should be, and that's a good thing. But beats the alternative. And I listened, but I did not understand, is what Daniel says. So I said, "Dear sir, what is this is Daniel now? What is the end result of these things?" And he said, "Go, choosing to walk through life, Daniel." Which means my God is judgmental. These words are sealed up, enclosed, signed, and stamped until the time of the final witnesses at the very end. Wow. Many will be purged of prevailing influences and cleansed as a result of choosing to examine religious and political constraints, independently purified as a result of avoiding societal pressures, and thus they will be refined, benefiting from having been tested and proven right. However, of those who will be condemned for acting improperly, perpetuating religious and political crimes, none of them will understand. And yet, the ones with insight who are discerning, demonstrating the capacity to be observant and circumspect, they will make the connections to understand. And from the time the continuity abolished by overwhelming ferocity and force, and the devastating and appalling abomination is appointed. This is when a physical manifestation, a person, as a corporal manifestation of Satan, goes into Jerusalem and proclaims themselves God and begins to plot the demise of Israel. There will be 1,290 days. That brings us right to the time that we're talking about with the fulfillment in October 7th, 2033. Blessed and delightful are those who continue in this state and who remain confident and certain, continuing in close contact for the arrival of 1,335 days. 45-day difference between those two numbers. That 45 days is the very time of judgment, of the trials of those who will be dispatched to Sheol. But even more importantly, it's the time of recompense, the time when those who were abused by Muslims, for example, or the Roman Catholic Church, or Assyrians, or Babylonians, or Nazis, that the victims of those crimes of God's people are going to be able to see those who perpetrated the crimes suffer for having done so. The people who had no ability to stop their tormentors are going, and who wish their tormentors could taste what they're enduring, are going to have that opportunity. So that's what happens during those 45 days. Of your own free will, choose to journey through life, traveling to the final destination. Then you will find spiritual rest, settling down and relaxing, allowed to be present and always remaining in your allotted place at the end of days. That's the conclusion. Daniel 12:13.
Wow.
That is why we're here. That is what we're inviting you to be part of. That's what Dode is calling you home to. On behalf of your God, Yahowah. But boy, when you look now at these words and light of what happened on October 7th, and where we are in this timeline, it really does speak to who we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, how much time we have left, who is going to benefit from this, who's going to pay a price because of it, what's going to happen next. It's all there for us. Really powerful. So that's what I wanted to share this evening with you. We'll return to the second Mizmor next week. But thank you all for listening. Blog Talk Radio is soon going to say goodbye. So we're at the end of even the allotted extension on our program. I thank you for putting up with my Surrotten, but I did want to record it.
Awesome.
Yeah, to have some fun with it. As I said, I would have written a nice poem, but that would have been against the contest rules.
Oh, good.
So, there we go. But thank you for all for listening. Please, if you have a chance, read and share Goddamn Religion with particularly with Jews, so they understand that their enemy is not Hamas, it's not Islamic Jihad, it's not the PLO, it's not Hezbollah, it's not the Ayatollahs, it's really not Joe Biden, it's not just progressives, it's Islam. And Islam has targeted Jews to annihilate them for 1,400 years. You should have figured it out a long time ago. There's no living with them. And if you don't do something about them, they will kill you. So it's important to understand that the Quran is the worst book ever written, that Allahu is Satan, and that Muhammad was not a prophet. He was a miserable pedophile and rapist and mass murdering terrorist, and that book is what inspired what happened on 10/7. So thank you for listening. We look forward to being with you next week. Thank you for listening to this presentation of what was revealed to Daniel and who Myka'el is, since he was brought up in the very Quran. I wanted to prove that Allahu was wrong. May Yah bless. Yep. Look forward to being with you next week. Good night.
Good night, y'all.
Night, Kirk. Night, Craig.
Good night.
Night, D.